What's up? What's up, everybody? It is KidSmoove, and this is another Apples and Oranges, man. I'm sorry to those who have been subscribed and haven't been seeing content as often as I did in the past, but been working some things out in my personal life and with my other channel and whatnot, so I should be getting things back into gear. So now, this video, I do want to talk about, shout out to, because like I said, I've been away, I know Gab and Sam, great channel, been watching this stuff. I always watch the Art of Dialogue stuff, when they covering Tupac and J Mix and whatnot. One thing that inspired me to do this video was because I remember, back in the days when my uncles and my aunts, they were much older than I was, so they really got to experience the East Coast West Coast war as like youth, and they're like, they were in their teens and early 20s, so it was real prevalent to them versus me. I'm 7-8 years old, so it wasn't really hitting me like that how it was to them. And I remember like radio stations, hearing on the radio and hearing their friends talk about Tupac and Biggie and West Coast, and I remember it was this idea that, Tupac turned his back on New York, or Tupac was a traitor, or Tupac betrayed New York because he's from New York, he's repping West Coast and California and all this other stuff. And I really didn't get it. And as I grew up and listening to really primary Tupac music and also West Coast music and whatnot, I had a few East Coast rappers that were in my playlist like all throughout my youth and even now. I never understood the notion that Tupac betrayed New York. Now, people go off the basis that Tupac was from New York. He was from Harlem, right? But people, I guess, I don't understand if back then people didn't understand it's not where you're from, it's where you're at. It's not where you're at, it's where you're going. You know what I mean? It's stuff like that. But let's get a quick background on Tupac, right? As far as location wise, yes, Tupac was born in New York. He was there for, I don't know how long Tupac was in New York for, but he wasn't in New York as a rapper. He moved to Baltimore, been there for a couple of years after New York, and then from Baltimore he went to Marin City, California. So he got signed living in California. The group Digital Underground was a West Coast group out of Oakland. There was a West Coast group. So we got Tupac. The stardom of Tupac, we got him in the West as a West Coast pretty much artist. The beats he was rapping to during that time. So it was like and then you can look at Tupac's line of work, the albums that was released. I think only in movies you could really refer to him in New York, as Juice was a New York-based movie, and Above the Rim was a New York-based movie. And I believe Poetic Justice is a West Coast-based movie, and Gridlock Gang related. I'm not sure where those. I think Gridlock was set in like Chicago or something like that, or Detroit or something like that. But when it comes to music, you look at his first album, Tupacalypse Now. That was a West Coast album. It was a West Coast album, inspired by NWA, Ice Cube, and all. That was a West Coast album. The production was West Coast. It was a West Coast album. No way around it. Strictly for my niggas. With the exception of some production by Big Stretch, Strictly for My Niggas was a West Coast album. West Coast. You know what I mean? You got Thug Life. All the people from there was from the West Coast. Like I said, with the exception of Big, they had some East Coast inspirations and whatnot, but Thug Life was more of a West Coast album. Hell, I wouldn't give credit to Me Against the World being the East Coast album, but then again, I can't, because the only songs I've seen or the themes of East Coast influence of Me Against the World was songs like Old School and songs like Temptations. Because I think Easy Mo B, he did Temptation. That that didn't seem like a West Coast vibe. That seemed more of an East Coast vibe. But didn't you listen to the full album of Me Against the World? It's West Coast. Heavy in the Game, the type of beats that had that same I can't describe like the sound. But Me Against the World was West Coast. Definitely a West Coast album. Wasn't until Tupac got bailed out of jail, signed with Death Row, and he's throwing up West Side, is when people, oh, he turned his back. He's repping West Coast now. But I'm like, damn, have you heard any of his stuff before? He always said, coming straight out of Oakland, you know what I mean? Oakland is not in New York. He was called MC New York when he first moved to California because he was from New York and he was new head of California, but he was a teen. So the whole notion of people like, oh, Tupac betrayed New York or he switched sides. No. Sure, he had folks on in New York that he rocked with. Of course, on the East Coast, New Jersey, hell, like shit down south. But the notion for people to be like, oh, I like All Eyes on Me, and this was a conversation, because it was like a West Coast album. I'm like, all his albums before that were West Coast albums. Like, All Eyes on Me was not the first West Coast album by Tupac. You know, All Eyes on Me became the most popular because it was a hit along with Me Against the World. Big hit, great singles. But the thing, only because of the beef with Biggie and him signing Death Row was, oh, Tupac turned his back on New York. No, Tupac never turned his back on New York. In fact, Tupac was done, got shit, like, bad shit happened to him while he was in the quad shooting. But that wasn't like a New York thing. It was just certain people, things that he didn't want to mess with, that had ties to a lot of the rappers in the East Coast. So that became a bigger problem. But listen to every Tupac album. It's all West Coast. It is all West Coast. Sure, there's been some East Coast inspirations or East Coast type beats he had here and there, but his full albums were all West Coast. Machiavelli, I couldn't tie with a coast because Machiavelli sounded so different. It didn't sound like, oh, this is a West Coast album. The beats didn't sound like, oh, this is stuff they use out in California or this is stuff they use out in New York. It was just kind of a different, because nobody was doing anything like that. You know what I mean? The Machiavelli had its own theme. That's the only album I wouldn't tie as a West Coast G-Funk or anything like that. That genre was a complete different album. But I never understood why people had that feeling or that hate towards Tupac, like, oh, he turned his back on New York, he betrayed New York because he signed with Death Row. Put yourself in a situation, right? You lose everything, money, sponsorship deals or movie deals, whatever. You're in jail. You got 4 or 5. You got 1.5 to 5 years that you're looking at doing. You got nothing. Your record label ain't doing nothing for you. Your current record label, your friends and other superstar friends ain't really doing much for you. Sure, they'll send a letter here and there, but nobody's really pushing for you. You got nobody. You about to be, when you do get out, you're gonna be broke. And you tell me, not only this man Suge Knight's not only gonna bail you out of jail, but I'm gonna give you money up front, and we're gonna get you a deal, put you back on top. You're gonna be like, nah, I'm gonna stay in jail. Or are you going to do that? You're gonna go with the person that's gonna feed you. Nobody in New York was feeding Tupac, even though he fed a lot of people in New York. Fed Stretch, fed Biggie, fed a lot of people in New York. Nobody was trying to feed Tupac or help him get out. So when Suge came in, he was like, you know what? He owe him. He's gonna do his albums. He's gonna represent because they got his back. He ain't turned his back on New York. If anything, New York turned their back on Tupac. But that's just my background, my thoughts. You guys let me know what you think in the comment section below. Hit that like button, that subscribe button. It's KidSmoove, Apples and Oranges. We out of here. Peace.